Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Battle Gamer, and we're back with another really good archetype. And I'm going to change the formula up a little bit in the video, so we'll see how this goes. So today, we're going to be talking about the dual weapon fighter, the dual weapon warrior. Easy to get those mixed up. And the dual weapon warrior is an archetype that is perfect for anyone who wishes to be dual wielding weapons of any kind, and I really do mean of any kind, at least of one-handed weapons anyway, because not only does it offer a bunch of feats for using dual weapons as in melee weapons, but you also get the ability to use thrown weapons and to use one-handed crossbow weapons as well. And where I guess any one-handed ranged weapon. I'd have to double check that to be sure. But this is great because not only is it great for the dual sword wielding fighter, but it's also great for the dual hand axe throwing ranger or the dual dagger throwing rogue or even the dual hand crossbow style gunslinger, and it might even work with guns. I'll double check here. I'll let y'all know in a moment. So this is a really good archetype if you plan on focusing on dual wielding weapons. But before we get into the dedication itself, I just wanted to let y'all know that I appreciate everything that you've done to help the channel out so far, and I have to at least ask that if you're enjoying the content, please at least leave a like, and if you want to see more like it, subscribe. You can also join our Discord linked in the description where we talk all things tabletop, not just games like Pathfinder or D&D. We also talk about games like Warhammer 40k, and we're constantly exploring other tabletop games as well. So if you want to talk about any of that, join us down below. But with that, let's get into the dual weapon warrior. I almost said it again. So the dual weapon warrior's dedication feat is really nice, actually. A lot of dedication feats and a lot of archetypes feel very meh, honestly. You don't get a lot. It's just to get you into the archetype in itself. Some of them are good, some of them are just meh. This one's good because you get double slice from the fighter feat list as just the dedication. Essentially, the dedication is you gain double slice. That's it. It's really good, honestly, and double slice is a really good feat. What double slice does is you spend 2 actions to attack with two weapons, one in each hand, essentially. So you have to be wielding 2 one-handed weapons. And what you do is when you make both of these strikes, you make them at your maximum attack value, or at least what your current attack value is, without reducing your multi-attack penalty. So if you haven't attacked yet, this is really good because you make both of your attacks at your full attack ability as long as both weapons have agile. Is it both weapons? If the second strike is not made with an agile weapon. So it can be a non-agile and an agile weapon, but if you're not using an agile weapon for your second strike, it incurs a -2 circumstance penalty. It's just a straight penalty, so even stacked with other kinds of penalties. Something to be aware of. And like most attacks most actions that make you use 2 attacks, this also stacks the damage so as to go against both weaknesses and resistances, making this really good for enemies that are incredibly tanky, and it's a better way to optimize your damage, and it's overall just a good feat. And it's going to be a feat you're going to be using a lot in this dedication because it's kind of just the best dual weapon feat in the game. Dual thrower is the feat that I think I understand, but I honestly don't know the 100% the intent of it. I think I understand, though, because it seems to be the intent of the feat, which is dual thrower. Essentially what it does is whenever another dual weapon warrior feat, which double slice does count for in this case, would refer to a melee weapon for a strike or effect, it also applies to thrown weapons or one-handed ranged weapons as well. I guess one-handed thrown weapons or one-handed ranged weapons as well. So the reason why this one is confusing is because it doesn't state that it beats the requirements for the feats. It just says whenever it refers to a melee strike. Actually, I'll read it here. Whenever a dual weapon warrior feat allows you to make a melee strike, you can instead make a ranged strike with a thrown weapon or one-handed ranged weapon you are wielding. So, why this is confusing is because if it doesn't apply to feats that state you must be wielding two one-handed melee weapons as the requirements, this feat literally does nothing. So my assumption is, and my assumption going forward, is that essentially any dual weapon warrior feats also apply to thrown weapons and one-handed ranged weapons as well, which does include guns. So this actually might not be a bad one for a dual gunslinger as well. So if I'm wrong, that's nothing new. That happens in a lot of these videos, but that is how I read the intent of this, and it's a weapon about being a dual weapon anyway. It doesn't even say dual weapon, melee sword user for the dedication. It's a dual weapon warrior. So that is the intent, and that's how I'm going to read dual thrower. Dual weapon reload is a really good feat if you plan on using a ranged weapon as one of or both of your weapons. And something I want to specify, this doesn't allow you to reload ranged weapons when you have a handful. This is a unique reload action that allows you to load a weapon even though you don't have a free hand. That is very important because this means it doesn't stack with anything like running reload or anything like that, which would be really cool, but that's not the intent. This is its own individual unique reload action where you can reload a ranged weapon you're holding even though you don't have a hand free, as long as it is a one-handed ranged weapon. So, really good. Honestly, it's a very solid feat overall, and it's perfect if you want to go the dual ranged weapon fighting style. Alright, twin parry, and I think I might have misspoke when I mentioned dual thrower. I mean dual thrower for any actions that require strikes. So I don't believe dual thrower actually applies to twin parry, because twin parry, what it is you're wielding two melee weapons and you can essentially raise your guard to get a +1 circumstance bonus to your AC, or a +2 of one of your weapons has the parry trait. Is that true? If either weapon has the parry trait, and then you lose this bonus if you lose one of your weapons, you no longer are parrying with it, or dual parrying with it. So overall, this is really good. I don't think it stacks with dual thrower though, so don't get me wrong. Dual thrower is for any actions that have strikes in them. This does not have a strike, so dual thrower doesn't allow you to parry with your guns, which honestly kinda sucks. I think that would be such a really, it's a +1, circumstance style, so, or bonus. So, I think it would be cool, but technically it doesn't work with the ranged weapons. It does technically work with thrown weapons because almost all thrown weapons are melee weapons as well. Not all of them though, but almost all. So, besides those few unique situations, this is still a really good feat. It allows you to essentially gain the benefits, especially if you're going like a longsword and like a dagger or something that has like a parry trait on it. This is really good because it essentially lets you have two weapons for the use of like double slice, while also being able to get essentially the benefits of a shield as a raise shield action with twin parry. It's just really good overall. Flensing Slice is probably one of the best feats in this entire archetype and just in general, and it's so nasty. So essentially what happens is if your last action was to double slice, which I will mention, since double slice applies with dual thrower, that does mean that, if I'm correct in my assumptions, if you shoot two one-handed ranged weapons with it, you can use that with double slice as well as thrown weapons. You can flensing strike them because it counts as a valid flensing strike. Because all the requirement is that your last action was a double slice and both your attacks hit, which is hard, kind of. Obviously it's one of your more statistical chances to get both strikes, since you're going to be using probably your max attack bonus for. But still, this is really good. And also what makes this nuts is you do a D8 persistent bleeding damage based on the highest essentially striking rune that is valid. It's per weapon damage dice, and that rule gets a little messy. Usually it just means the initial weapon damage die for the weapon plus any striking runes that are applied to it. So if you have a striking rune, this does a d8 per damage die, which means a striking rune does 2d8 persistent bleed damage. That's nuts. And they also become flat-footed to you, and its resistance to any physical damage is reduced by 5. These effects last until the beginning of your next turn. So even on their turn and all the way up for a full round, they're going to be taking extra damage to all physical damage. And they're flat-footed. This is such a debilitating strike, and all it requires is you to hit with both of your double slice attacks, which is super likely, especially if you're something like a fighter or a gunslinger. And like I said, this would apply, so you could do your double shot and flens a section of an enemy off, from my understanding, because the only requirement is that it has, or that your last action was a double slice, and it mentions nothing about requiring a melee strike for those strikes. So something to keep in mind. This is potentially really nutty on something like a gunslinger. Dual Weapon Blitz, I think, is super underrated for how good it is. So what Dual Weapon Blitz is for 2 actions, you can stride and make 2 attacks, right? So, okay, right, that doesn't seem too crazy. Well, when taken in consideration that, 1, this doesn't even specify... Oh, no, it does specify 2 one-handed melee weapons. So again, dual thrower should apply to this one, which means that if you're using thrown weapons or ranged weapons, so if you're the rogue using daggers, the gunslinger using guns, whatever, this is actually the perfect kiting tool, because what it does is allows you to stride, and it doesn't say towards an enemy, and at any point during that stride, you can make both your strikes. You can strike once with each of the 2 required at any point during the movement. So as long as you're within range, even with just in the first like 5-10 feet from where you initially started, you could back up a full stride and hit both the enemies, because at least with, if you moved 5 feet and you're still within range, you can still make both your attacks and then finish your movement. It's perfect for kiting, and it's such a good feat in general when used in that context. And even then, when used in conjunction with a melee weapons, this is a great engagement tool, because you can rush in on your enemy and strike them with both of your weapons. Now, they do apply their normal multi-attack penalty, so your second attack might not be as likely to hit, but still, this is a really good action, even though it's a 2-action action. I've been saying a lot of action for this one. Dual Weapon Blitz is just a really, really good feat. Twin Riposte, or Twin Repose, however you want to pronounce it, is a really good a really great reaction, sorry about that, if you don't already have something like Attack of Opportunity, or even if you do have Attack of Opportunity, it doesn't have the same trigger, so this is just another opportunity. Essentially what it is it allows you, whenever an enemy critically misses to hit you while you're benefiting from Twin Parry, you can strike or attempt to disarm that enemy. Now, something about disarm is a terrible action when taken by itself, but it's an absolutely great reaction, because as a reaction, until the enemy adjusts their grip, or I think until the beginning of their next turn, they are suffering a -2 attack penalty to all further attacks, either meaning they have to waste an action or become highly inaccurate. And it's not a wasted reaction that the enemy can just, like get over, despite even having the attack trait as well. So this disarm action is genuinely actually really good, but the strike is also good as well and lets you keep on the offensive even when you're frontlining an enemy. It's a really good feat. Dual Onslaught is not as good of a feat as it initially looks like. So more or less what it does is when you double slice, if you happen to miss with both attacks, you can still essentially apply the effects of hitting with one of them, which I'm assuming in this situation means dealing the damage of that weapon, because I don't know how else one would apply the effects of hitting with a weapon. I might be wrong here. This feat is not very clearly written, but that does sound good, right? It means that even if you're fighting like a difficult enemy, it allows you to still keep doing damage to them. But in most situations, especially when using double slice, you're likely to hit with at least one of your weapons. You're very likely to hit with at least one of your weapons, unless you're intentionally using double slice as your second attack action, which, to be fair, with this feat included, is not a bad idea, because you get essentially a failure effect of still doing your damage anyway. Now, you can't apply the damage of any weapon that critically missed in this attack, so both critically missed, you can't do anything with it. But as it's being read, as I'm reading it here, and I'll read it out loud, when you use double slice, if you miss with both strikes, choose one of the two weapons and apply the effects of a hit with that weapon, which I'm assuming means dealing the damage. It doesn't state specifically, and there's other points in the book and in general where they do state it. So writing aside, I believe it's just you do damage, and it can't be with any weapon that doesn't critically fail, or that does critically fail. So in any regard, this is okay. It just depends on your setup, I suppose. If you're using an attack action and then going into double slice, this has a lot more value. But if you're using double slice just normally, you're actually very much not likely to get the effects of onslaught off, because you're very likely to hit with at least one of your weapons. So just something to keep in mind. Improved Twin Riposte is the same as the one before, or the better version of the one before. Actually, no, it's not any of that. What am I talking about? So what it is you gain an extra reaction at the beginning of every one of your turns to do a Twin Riposte when an enemy critically misses you as an additional reaction. So you get 2 reactions, one of which can be the Twin Riposte, which is really good. I don't know how often enemies are critically missing your characters. There could be certain builds, there could be certain ways that this is really good, but honestly, I don't see much use in this one other than the fact that it just allows you to use your reaction. So if you're like a dual wielding champion for whatever reason, this is actually a really good feat, because then it allows you to still have your champion's reaction without worrying about losing out on a damage opportunity. But for something like the fighter or something like that, I don't know. I don't see how often this one will come up, but it's a pretty okay feat nonetheless, and perfect if you're using the bonus archetype feat rules, because then it just gives you a little bit more of a fail-safe, and I recommend everyone use the bonus archetype feat rules. 2-weapon flurry is interesting. It's okay. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it. So it's a flourish, so you can only do 1 flourish per turn, and not only that, it's a press action, so you must be under the effects of a multi-attack penalty in order to use this action. What it does is, for a single action, you can strike using 2 one-handed weapons that you're wielding. Really good when you think about it, 2 attacks for 1 action. What's not to like? Well, the thing is since it's a press action, at minimum, you're looking at either a -5 or a -2 to the, or -3 to the attack, I think. Either way, unless you have something that adjusts your multi-attack penalty, and if you're using agile weapons. And strike twice, once with each weapon. So this doesn't also conserve your multi-attack penalty. So you're going to be making one of those at your second multi-attack penalty, so the -5 standardly, and then the second attack will be at your -10. There's nothing that conserves that accuracy. So this seems more like a desperate action. This is a terrible action to do after double slice, because double slice counts as 2 attack actions, so both of your attacks would be made at a -10, not really likely to be hit with, and you're better off feinting for the double slice instead with that action. It's a decent action when taken into consideration, you know, maybe you made a single attack action and now you're going for another double attack so you can do another action. Maybe it's great if you're planning on feinting before this one so you can strike, feint, then use this action. I'm not 100% sure. This is really good, and it's really good if all you want to do is just flurry an enemy with as many blows as you can manage. Just know that action economy wise, it's not the most efficient. There's better ways you can even help your allies with that action. And if you just don't happen to have the skills necessary to do extra actions, then yeah, why not make as many attacks as possible? If you don't have anything to intimidate or feint with or recall knowledge on or whatever, then go ahead, flurry as much as you can. Well, once per round because it's a flourish action, but you know what I mean. It's okay. It's a really good efficient attack action because it's 2 attacks at, you know, whatever. Just know that it's not the most accurate and it's not going to give you probably as much damage as you might think. Twin defense is really good, except that it's a level 18 feat, which means you're not likely to get access to this feat and stance in general. So it's a stance, and essentially what it means is you're constantly under the effects of twinned parry, meaning you don't need to use an action every round to raise your defenses. Really good. Saves you a lot of action economy over the course of a fight. It's a really good feat. Don't get me wrong. It's a really good feat, and I would say even worth the level 18 pickup, depending on how your build is going. Though, it's not a feat you're likely to get a lot out of because it's going to be already towards the end of your adventure. Nonetheless, a really good feat. If you're playing like a level 21 shot, this is a really great one to pick up, honestly. It's really good and just saves you a lot of good action economy and keeps your AC just up in general. And that's going to be it for the dual weapon warrior. This is a really good one. This is the perfect archetype for dual wielding weapons. And I know a lot of people out there really enjoy the aesthetic and the feel of dual wielding weapons to, you know, rain blows down on your enemies. They got lots of feats for getting extra actions, doing multiple strikes, even doing lots of good damage. It's a very good combat-based archetype. I really like it in general, and it's one of the archetypes that really rewards the dual-wielding weapon style, which you actually don't see a lot of besides the ranger feats that really apply to that, or I guess the fighter feats that really apply to it as well. Other than that, this is a really good pickup for something like Swashbuckler, or even if you're using the bonus archetype rules as a fighter or ranger, because you can get a lot of your feats for free, or some feats that do something similar to what you do in the ranger's case. In any regard, I hope y'all liked it. It's a really good archetype and perfect for those who really just want to lay on the hurt with their characters. It's really, really good. But with that, we're going to go ahead and call it here. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.